Alright, so today is Sunday, January 26, 2020, and I'm standing here at the intersection of Annette, Dundas, and Dupont Street in Toronto. On the front of my recumbent bike here, I have an action camera mounted, and in this video I'm going to be riding over in that direction, passing under that bridge, and giving a narrated tour of Dupont Street in Toronto. Alright, so as the traffic light turns green, I'm crossing this intersection here. It's actually kind of a complicated intersection because there are a bunch of different roads that come together there. As I mentioned, Dupont, Davenport, and Annette Street, and they meet at kind of a funny angle there, so it's kind of a complicated intersection. Right now we're just crossing underneath of the railway tracks. I believe the tracks are operated by CN Canadian National Railway. I know that the train, for example, that goes from Toronto's Union Station to the Toronto Pearson International Airport, there's a train that makes that journey that's called the Union Pearson Express, or the Up Express, and that goes along those tracks there. So do the train which goes up on the Barrie line, I believe. So we're just crossing Edwin Street here, and as I mentioned, this road that I'm riding on is called Dupont Street. And this portion of Dupont has a bike lane, but you can see there's these big mounds of snow in that bike lane right now, which makes it kind of unusable, unfortunately. Last week I made a video where I rode my bike down Yonge Street while it was snowing, and that snow, a fair bit of snow accumulated from that snow event, but since then the snow stayed on the ground for almost a full week, and then yesterday, Saturday, it pretty much rained for the whole day, and it was a little bit warmer, and all that warm weather and rain washed away most of the snow. So straight ahead you can see another bridge that we're going to go under, and on top of it you can see a green railway train. That's one of GO Transit's railway trains, and this is another line of the CN rail line that we're going to go underneath here. Even though there's a bike lane over there, I'm not really going to stay in it because I'm worried about getting trapped, and then you can see another big mountain of snow there on the right. Over on the left, that's the Food Basics store, which is a grocery store that I shop at occasionally. Food Basics is owned by the same company that owns Metro, another Canadian grocery chain. Food Basics is their discount brand store, so they have better prices than Metro typically. So if they have something that's on sale that I want to take advantage of, I might make a trek out here. This intersection is Dupont and Lansdowne. I believe the building that Food Basics is in is some kind of old factory or warehouse. I'm not sure the history of that particular building. Dupont Street has a long history of being used for industrial purposes. There's a lot of old buildings on this street that used to be factories and various different warehouses and things like that, some of which I'll be pointing out along the way. The reason that Dupont has such a industrial-based history is because just north of here, a little bit to basically all the buildings that are on the left side of the road here, they back onto another set of railway tracks. Those ones are the CP rail tracks. In fact, on the left side of the screen you can see a railway train that's actually driving just off to the side, and that is the CP rail line right there. So because there's basically a railway that all of these properties on the left back onto, a lot of businesses wanted to open with their backs to have that, direct access to that transportation mode. Back when railways were really the prime way of moving things around this country. You can see that Dupont has sort of jogged a little bit to the north here, and that's to go around this property on the right, which is a mall called the Galleria Mall, which actually has been slated for redevelopment. Still seems to be open at the moment, but I don't know how much longer the Galleria Mall will be here for. We're now at Dufferin Street. So the point where I started my video, if we were to continue a little bit further to the west from there, in the opposite direction that we're heading now, that would have taken us into a neighborhood that's known as the Junction. At least if we stayed on Dundas Street. Dundas Street is kind of centered, or sorry, the Junction is kind of centered around the intersection of Dundas and Keele Streets, which is not too far away from where I started the video. In fact, the reason why I was over there today and why I'm making this video is because I was buying something used on using the service called Kijiji, which is kind of like Canada's version of Craigslist, which is a local listing service. So at the beginning of the video, you might have noticed I had something loaded on the back of my bike. I bought a belt sander today. A belt, a strip of one inch belt strip sander that also has a disc sander built into it. And while I was there, the guy was selling a whole bunch of other stuff, and he convinced me to buy some other things as well. So got a bunch of stuff on the back of my bike that I'm carrying today. Alright, so the intersection we're approaching here is called Dover Court. And if you look at that building that's over on the left, that one that mostly has glass on it, that's sort of just beyond the intersection, that building used to be occupied by a company. In fact, they were there for a really long time, from what I understand, called Hamilton Gear. And they made like gear systems, like very large scale gears were produced there. And they were, as I said, around for a long time, and I think they closed in the 1990s. But they were involved in a lot of really big projects, including, building some of the mechanisms for the St. Lawrence Seaway, sort of the lock system that's used for getting boats between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, or at least that's one portion of the St. Lawrence Seaway that's closest to here. Apparently they also developed or manufactured some of the equipment that's used at Toronto's Skydome or Rogers Centre for the retractable roof. So it's neat that something like that was built right here in the city. Not just within the greater Toronto area, but actually right within the heart of the city. Dupont Street curves again here. And we're now crossing Ossington Avenue. And the reason for all these curves is because, like a lot of other streets that I've featured in my videos, Dupont Street was a street that was not really part of the original grid of Toronto, and it was later sort of straightened out. I'm assuming after automobiles became, more common in the city, they wanted to make the city into, better for driving, so they connected up a bunch of streets together that were not originally aligned to one another. So there's a bunch of curves to be able to accommodate that. The name DuPont is named after somebody from Toronto, I believe. I'll put the information on the screen. I always thought it was I always wondered whether DuPont had any connection with the company that's called DuPont that makes chemicals and things, just strictly because, it's a very industrial street. But no, it was named after this person. Although it had a very long industrial past, a lot of those sites that were originally factories and things are being redeveloped, including this building on the left. You can see there's going to be a condo that's going to be built there. It's a big construction site at the moment. This building that's coming up on our left, that brick building, the 5-story building, that was a building that was built in the 19-teen years, like the 1915 or 12 or something like that. And that was built by the Ford Motor Company, and that was a factory where they assembled and built Model T Fords on the upper levels, the second, third, fourth, and fifth floor. They actually were assembling the cars up there, and the ground floor was their showroom. So that's a kind of a neat concept like that. And this building that's up on the left, that's Loblaws, which is a grocery store. But before that building was built, there used to be another building there that was occupied by a newspaper called the Evening Telegram. And they were a right-wing Toronto newspaper that at one time was the most popular paper in Toronto. This building that's coming up on the left, just beyond this traffic light here, there's some kind of a club that occupies that building now, but at one time that was the Toronto Skating Club, which was, the first indoor arena that was in the city that was dedicated to figure skating, I assume, as opposed to hockey playing. Those are the two main uses for arenas here in Canada. I guess that's if you exclude curling, but those arenas are quite different. They don't really call them arenas even. Alright, so there's another traffic light here. Not really a proper intersection. I guess it's just a pedestrian crosswalk. We've got a red light, so we'll wait for that to turn green. So the temperature today is a little bit above freezing, probably 2 or 3 degrees Celsius today. And I've been hoping today that after all the rain we got yesterday that the roads would be really nice and clear and all the salt and everything would be washed away, but I was quite disappointed when I came out and saw that they had put all kinds of new salt down on the roads. I guess because there was so much water and it's hovering around the freezing point, they don't want that stuff to freeze and turn into ice. I'm not really a big fan of salt when I'm riding my bikes on the road because the salt does damage to them, and I'm actually riding one of my recumbent bikes today, which I'd like to keep away from the salt. So after I get home today, I'm going to have to do some cleaning to get rid of all that mess that I created on this short bike ride that I'm doing today, unfortunately. This road here is called Howland. Howland has a fire hall on it, sort of hidden away in the neighborhood streets. If you turn to the right here, you'd see that old fire hall building tucked away amongst the residential houses. This part of Dupont is part of the neighborhood known as the Annex. The Annex basically spans from Bloor Street north to the CP rail tracks, which are just beyond Dupont, so this would be considered part of the Annex. And I wish I knew more of the history of these other buildings, but the only ones that I really was able to find information about were the ones that have historical plaques. Right here we're going to be crossing Spadina Avenue, or Spadina Road actually, north of Bloor. Spadina's name changes from Spadina Avenue to Spadina Road. And underneath this intersection is the Dupont subway station, which is on the Line 1 University line. And this Dupont is the last station before you get to St. Clair West, which is a fair bit of a gap in the system. After you get beyond here, the stations are a little bit more spread apart. Just a little bit north of here, there's a couple other landmarks. There's There's the City of Toronto Archives building, and a little bit beyond there you eventually hit the road dead ends because there's quite a steep hill and there's some stairs, and when you climb up the stairs, there's on one side there's Casa Loma, and on the other side there's a building called Spadina House. Spadina is spelled the same as Spadina. In fact, Spadina is actually the correct way of pronouncing, or the original way of pronouncing Spadina, but at some point it's changed. So I don't really ride on Dupont, at least not from end to end like this, very often. Just on the other side of the railway tracks, just north of here, there's a road called Davenport, which basically runs the same length as Dupont, but it has a bike lane on it. So that seems to be what I prefer to ride on if I'm going east-west, but there are businesses and things along this road that I sometimes want to go and visit, so I do end up riding this road from time to time, and usually, shorter little segments of it. In fact, this traffic light we're about to cross here is actually Davenport Road, which is that road I was just mentioning that goes parallel. Right around here, Davenport Road curves and heads south, and that's why we're crossing a road that otherwise goes parallel to Dupont. And after here, a lot of the traffic on Dupont turns either right or left, and this part of the remaining part of Dupont here is really just a residential street. It's all just, no more businesses, just houses here. So I can certainly feel the weight from all those items that I bought earlier today loaded up on the back of my bike, but loading them on there was certainly a cinch thanks to the milk crate that I have installed back there. In fact, this is the bike that I demonstrated how I installed a removable milk crate onto, so that design is still working very well. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll put a link in the description below. So yeah, you get from a road that has lots of traffic lights on it to a road that now has stop signs every now and again. So yeah, within this residential area here, there's not a whole lot for me to really point out. Within the annex of Toronto, there are a lot of rich and famous people that live here. I don't know whether any of these houses we're actually riding past belong to anybody that you'd know the name of, but of course I don't actually know where any of those people actually live, and if I did, it would kind of be wrong for me to actually point out their houses. So this big building over on the right is an old Anglican church known as the Church of Messiah. And just beyond there, this is where the street known as Dupont terminates. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed joining me for this tour of Dupont Street here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. If you watched all the way to the end of the video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.